Well, buckle up, folks, because things just got spicy down in Maryland, of all places. Yes, Maryland. A judge there decided to tell the President of the United States, "Hold your horses, buddy." This wasn't some minor quibble about the White House lawn needing a mow. Oh no. This was about President Trump's grand plan to reorganize the entire federal government. The judge took one look at this ambitious reshuffle and declared it unconstitutional. That's the judicial equivalent of a mic drop, right there. This ruling from Maryland is sending ripples, nay tsunamis, across the entire country. Think of it as a legal butterfly flapping its wings in Baltimore and causing a constitutional hurricane in, say, California. This Maryland decision has thrown a massive spotlight onto this relentless tug of war, a fundamental tension baked into the American system of government. So yes, please ensure your seatbelts are securely fastened. The judiciary, those learned individuals in rather fetching robes, have a monumentally important job in this whole democracy experiment. They are, in essence, the referees of government. Their primary role, especially when it comes to the president and the executive branch, is to ensure that power doesn't get too concentrated. The recent Maryland case serves as a textbook example of this principle in action. President Trump had a plan, a big plan, to reorganize the federal government. However, the judge in Maryland didn't just look at the potential benefits, they looked at and the method, according to the judge, was unconstitutional. This awesome power of the courts, known as judicial review, is a cornerstone of American democracy. So, when that judge in Maryland put the brakes on the president's reorganization plan, they were upholding a fundamental principle of American governance. They were issuing a clear reminder to the executive branch that there are limits to power, even presidential power. So, amidst all this high-stakes wrangling between judges and the president, what does the average American actually think? Well, according to a rather illuminating Elon University poll conducted in April 2025, people are, to put it mildly, a tad concerned. A significant 67% of Americans expressed fear of a constitutional crisis stemming from these ongoing conflicts between the Trump administration and the courts. The same Elon poll revealed that 47% of Americans support federal judges intervening in Trump's actions. However, 34% believe these judicial rulings have gone too far. This underlying anxiety might explain the broader support for judicial checks, even if those checks lead to more governmental friction and primetime news alerts. Legal scholars and constitutional experts are observing these judicial executive showdowns with a potent cocktail of academic fascination and profound unease. Professor Stephen Vladek from Georgetown Law has highlighted a crucial point. The judiciary is increasingly functioning as the check on the executive branch. This is largely because Congress appears to be somewhat disengaged from its oversight duties. The American system of government is designed as a three-legged stool, with the executive, legislative, and judicial branches all playing a role in checking and balancing one another. If one leg, in this case Congress, becomes significantly shorter or weaker, it places an enormous and disproportionate strain on the other two, particularly the judiciary. Judges are consequently being thrust into the political arena more frequently and more directly than perhaps ever before. This is not an ideal scenario. It's like asking the referee to also play defense for one of the teams. Section 5 Deja Vu all over again. History's judicial showdowns. Confrontations between the president and the judiciary are hardly a novel phenomenon in the grand sprawling narrative of American history. One might recall President Andrew Jackson, who, faced with a Supreme Court ruling he vehemently disagreed with concerning the Cherokee Nation, is famously quoted as saying, "John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it." Consider President Franklin D. Roosevelt, who, deeply frustrated by the Supreme Court consistently striking down key components of his New Deal programs, controversially attempted to pack the court. These historical precedents serve to remind us that the current tensions, while undeniably intense, are part of a recurring motif in the American governmental saga. Section 6, Trump's playbook, no judge can stop me. Spoiler, they can. The current administration, helmed by President Trump, has adopted a notably assertive and some would argue overtly aggressive posture towards the judicial branch of government. President Trump himself has gone on public record stating that, in his view, no judge should possess the authority to rule against his administration's proposed changes or policies. This is, to put it mildly, an extraordinary assertion. It fundamentally misinterprets the entire well-established constitutional concept of judicial review and the foundational principle of the separation of powers. Despite the formidable and often inflammatory words emanating from the administration and its supporters, the actual track record concerning outright defiance of court orders is, thus far, somewhat more nuanced and mixed. As of a few months prior to this writing, there were reportedly 47 active lawsuits challenging various new policies enacted by the Trump administration. Nevertheless, the American public is clearly demonstrating significant concern regarding the potential for the executive branch to overstep its authority. Section 7. California Scheming: How One State's Ruling Rocks the Nation. Now let's delve into the fascinating interconnectedness of our federal legal system, specifically how a single judge's decision in a state like Maryland can reverberate with considerable force across the entire nation, particularly impacting a state as influential and often oppositional as California. When a federal judge issues a ruling on the constitutionality of a federal plan, that ruling, while immediately and legally binding only within that specific judge's district, carries significant persuasive authority in other jurisdictions. California, a state that frequently finds itself at loggerheads with the Trump administration on a diverse array of policy fronts, pays exceptionally close attention to these kinds of judicial pronouncements. If a federal judge in Maryland determines that a particular federal action is unconstitutional, it provides both a strategic roadmap and considerable encouragement for similar legal challenges to be mounted in other states, most definitely including California. The Maryland judge's definitive ruling that President Trump's reorganization plan was unconstitutional has a direct and immediate impact on federal government operations nationwide. This profound interconnectedness powerfully highlights the substantial influence and reach of the federal judiciary. Section 8. The Great Imbalance. Is Congress asleep at the wheel? We've dedicated a considerable amount of discussion to the dynamic interplay between judges and presidents, the thrust and parry of judicial review and executive action. But let's not forget the often overlooked third branch of government in this intricate dance Congress. According to a growing chorus of experts, including Professor Vladek, Congress has been conspicuously quiet. This perceived congressional abdication is a substantial contributing factor to why the courts are increasingly finding themselves thrust into the glaring spotlight. They are, in many ways, stepping into a power vacuum. Historically, Congress played a far more robust and vigorous role in checking and balancing presidential power. However, in more recent years, particularly during periods of divided government, or conversely, when the president's own party controls one or both houses of Congress, that critical oversight function can become significantly muted, if not entirely dormant. If Congress isn't actively pushing back against potential executive overreach, the judiciary often becomes the only remaining branch willing or able to do so. Section 9. Conclusion: The Future of Power, a ticking constitutional time bomb. So after all this examination of gavels, executive orders, and public opinion polls, where precisely does this leave us, the citizens of this grand and currently rather noisy republic? We find ourselves observing a judiciary that is increasingly stepping into the breach, actively working to check an executive branch characterized by its assertive and often boundary-pushing approach. We see a public that is, according to recent data, deeply concerned about the very real possibility of a constitutional crisis looming on the horizon. And, concurrently, we have a legislative branch, Congress, that many astute observers feel is not adequately fulfilling its crucial role in the delicate dance of checks and balances. The Maryland judge's bold decision to block President Trump's federal reorganization plan is but one prominent flashpoint in this ongoing and intensifying struggle for power, a clear symptom of a larger, more systemic tension coursing through the veins of American government. The current administration's distinctive rhetoric, which frequently includes direct challenges to the very authority of judges to rule against its policies, adds yet another layer of volatility and unpredictability to this already complex equation. The future balance of power in America hangs precariously, and one cannot shake the feeling that a constitutional clock might just be ticking.